As we continue in this theme this morning of freedom pursuers in this session, there is a group of people that I want to talk to you about who are in deep and desperate need for healing and freedom and a strong connection to the Church of Jesus Christ. It is people who are living with mental illness and their families. Now, sadly, I hear many church leaders dismiss the needs of people living with mental illness. Sometimes they say it's not real. It's not real. It's just a spiritual issue. And people just need to pray more, attend Bible study, confess their sins. Mental illness isn't real. And they dismiss the needs of so many people. I've also heard pastors and church leaders say, well, that's outside the purview of the church. This is not what the church should be caring about. We need to be caring about something that affects more people. Well, I want to tell you that in my country of the United States, 1 in 5 people are living with a mental illness today. And in my country, that equates to about 59 million people. In Australia, where we are meeting for this global conference, there are 1 in 5 Australians who are living with a mental illness, which equates to about 4.9 million people. But we're a global group. So if we're looking on a global scale, about 1 in 8 people around the world are living with a mental illness. And that equates to about 970 million people, which is very close to 1 billion. So if I were to ask you this morning to number off, let's just start over here. I wouldn't do it, but take the time. But if we numbered off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and asked every 8th person to stand, you would begin to catch a glimpse of how common, how real mental illness is, and the fact that all of us know somebody or love somebody, or we ourselves are living with a mental illness. In our family, it was our youngest son, Matthew, who had serious mental illness, and he took his life 12 years ago after 20 years of a battle with serious mental illness. I know it's real. I know it's common. And I know that I loved someone with a mental illness. Well, if that's the case, if it really is that common and so many people are struggling with their mental health, doesn't it seem right or logical or good that the Church of Christ have something powerful to say to these millions of individuals and their families who are suffering? We have to say, what is God's posture toward people who are struggling with mental illness? What would Jesus have said if he were standing in front of us today and you were to tell him your struggle with your mental health? I think Luke 4 is such a perfect example of what Jesus did and does for people living with mental illness. In Luke 4, there's the story Jesus has just come back from 40 days in the wilderness where he's been tempted by the devil. He is weak and weary, but he goes to the synagogue in Nazareth, as is his custom. And they hand him the scroll of Isaiah. And, you know, it didn't have verses and little chapter markings like we did. So he unrolled it to this portion of Isaiah, and he read it. And it says, he read, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then he sat down and said, "Today in your presence, this has been fulfilled." He identified himself as the Messiah. And he said, the Messiah stands with the suffering, and I stand with the suffering because I am the Messiah. And that's what we who call ourselves his followers are to do as well. We are to stand with the suffering wherever and whenever we come across anyone in need. So I want to spend a little bit of time that I have here talking to you on a very practical level of what I believe every church can do for people and their families who are impacted by mental illness. Whether you are a rural church or an urban church, whether you are a home church of 10 people or a community of 100 or 1,000 or a network of churches, every single church can do the 6 things that I'm going to tell you because they don't require money. They don't require an extensive staff. They don't require this fabulous plan. These are things that every single church, every one of you represents a church that can do something practical for people living with mental illness. Let me give them to you quickly. The first is, and it's built on the acrostic church, because the church is the hope of the world, of course. So the first C is to care for and support individuals and families. I'm going to go over these really quickly and then come back and focus on one of them. This is the starting place, and we'll come back to this one. The H, the first H, is every church can help with practical needs. People need food. They need maybe a ride to visit a doctor. Maybe they need someone to take care of their children while they keep a mental health appointment. Maybe they're just going through a rough time and they need you to come take out their trash, mow their lawn, something simple that comes alongside. Every church can use volunteers. A ministry to people living with mental illness cannot be dependent on the clergy, on the staff. There'll never be enough. But there are volunteers in every single church who are looking for something meaningful to do. Use volunteers. Remove the stigma is the R in this acrostic. This is probably the most powerful thing of all that you can do. What does it cost to tell somebody it is not a sin to be sick? It doesn't cost anything, right? It doesn't cost anything, but removing the stigma is a powerful step in helping people who are living with mental illness and their families. And then the second C is to collaborate with the community. We are not mental health professionals. I'm not a mental health professional. My husband's not a mental health professional. But there are people in our community who are, and they have information that we can use, that we can utilize, that we can share in our congregation. And then the second H is to offer hope. Because listen, hope is in the DNA of the church. If we have nothing else to offer, we have hope to offer for not only the life to come, but for this life in our promise to be with people in their suffering. Now, like I said, I only have time to talk about the first C. You can go to my website, hopeforbrightertomorrows.org/videos, and watch the full message. But in this time, I want to just go onto that first point because it's the pivotal one. If you don't get the first one, the rest of it doesn't matter. The first one is to care for and support individuals and families who are living with. Galatians 6:2, Paul says, share each other's burdens. And in this way, obey the law of Christ. What is the law of Christ? We know it. It's already been spoken today. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, and your neighbor as yourself. If that's the law of Christ, and Paul says that we are supposed to share each other's burdens, and that demonstrates that we are following and obeying the love of Christ, then this must be something that the church must engage in. I really believe that every church, no matter the size or location, can make an intentional and deliberate decision to become a caring and compassionate sanctuary for those who are living with mental illness and their families. Often, people who are living with mental illness, particularly those who have a very serious condition that might prohibit them really from working or earning a living or being in relationships with others, they become outcasts in their family. They become excluded from their family of origin. If they are also excluded from the family of faith, where will they go? If the family of God does not welcome people in their suffering, people living with mental illness, and some of the difficulties that might bring, where will they go? Frequently, the excuse, though, as it says, I really have to drill down on this a little bit, is people will say, but we're not a large church. They would look at our church, Saddleback, and say, well, of course, you're a big church. You can do all sorts of things. You can have extensive ministries for every single need that anybody could possibly have. But we are just a home fellowship of 10 people. Or we're in a rural area, and there aren't many people around. What can we possibly do? And we use that as an excuse to justify our lack of care and support for the mentally ill. But I just have to tell you again, how much money or training does it cost to make a decision in your church to be known in your community as a place where people who are living with mental illness can come? That your church is a place where they're going to receive care and compassion, not judgment or somebody doubting whether their illness is even real. What does that cost us to become caring people? Well, in a monetary sense, it costs nothing. But as my dear sister said in her message earlier, it costs us plenty, but the cost is measured very differently. There is a cost in caring, and it requires that we let go of self-centeredness, of ignorance, of fear, of apathy, and move towards our brothers and sisters who are living with mental illness in love and radical friendship. Now, radical friendship is one of my favorite terms. I learned it from one of my mentors, John Swinton, who wrote a book called Resurrecting the Person. Get this book, Resurrecting the Person by John Swinton. And he says in there that in Western cultures, we don't really understand friendship the way people in other parts of the world do. He said in Western parts of the world where I live, we define friendship by one of two things. We meet somebody and we say, oh, you're so likable. We could be friends. I like you. Let's be friends. Or we say, oh, you're interested in football? I'm interested in football. You like to watch this particular TV show? I love that show. And suddenly we are drawn to people who are likable or have the same interests we do. And that is the basis of our friendships. That is such a shallow basis for friendship. And when rough time comes, when tragedy strikes our lives, when hard times are a part of our days, that kind of friendship will not last. We need instead the kind of radical friendship that God gave to us. When he met us, we were not likable. The Bible says that we were filthy in our sins. Romans 5:8, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. We were going in the complete opposite direction from God. We weren't going in the same direction as God. He was going this way, we were going this way, but still he came for us and he radically friended us. John 15:15, Jesus said to his disciples when he had an opportunity to define his relationship to them, he said, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. We have been friended by God. And if we in the church took that same mode, that same model of Jesus, not a shallow level of friendship that's based on things that don't really hold up, but that kind of whether somebody's like you or not, has the same interest as you or not, might believe very differently than you, might have a lifestyle very different from you. But if you radically extend the friendship of God's love to them in the way that it has been extended to us, then there would hardly be any lonely people left on the planet. And I don't know that we think that's possible. It's a very high standard, but it is in the DNA of the church. It is God's call for us. So let me wrap this up. What can every church do? Every church can make a decision to care for. Doesn't matter the size, the location. It doesn't matter how many people you have. Doesn't matter your financials, what your bank statement looks like. Every church can make a decision to care. Every church can help with practical needs. Every church can use volunteers. Every church can remove the stigma. Every church can collaborate with the community. And every church can offer hope. Let's do that for the glory of God and the help of our brothers and sisters who suffer.